pleasure to be here, and I apologize for the technical challenges. But you know, again, technology is great when it works, and it's sometimes a challenge. But thrilled to be here and happy to speak to you today. This is an interactive discussion. I certainly, I've got some slides, and I know that I see that the person following me is going to talk about diabetes, so I don't want to steal any of their thunder. But this is about you, and you have the opportunity to ask questions. So, this is going to be a conversation, not just me just going through a bunch of slides.
Dr. Chapman, for the sake of the video, could you use a microphone?
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Well, somebody can't be here, and they asked me to record.
Certainly, happy to accommodate that. I'm a walker and a talker. I'm not.
Well, matter of fact, we'll give you this one where you can walk. This way you can walk. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Just.
So just a little bit about me. You can ignore all the initials and that kind of thing. But I am a family physician. I'm also boarded in clinical informatics. I do have a public health background. I have a master's in public health. But I've also been involved in organized medicine. I've done some disaster relief work. I was born and raised in Gulfport, Mississippi, which is, as you know, on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So I grew up learning how to survive hurricanes and those kinds of things, and how to keep the right things in the freezer, and how to make fresh water when you don't think you have any. So kind of grew up doing those things, and it made an impression on me. So I've kind of done that as well throughout my career. I practiced in a private practice for 17 years, and Dr. Rachel Coleman was one of my practice partners, and we were friends to this day. She was a fantastic physician and a fantastic friend. So when she asked me if I could do this, I said, sure, just tell me where and when. So what's the big deal? Why is health in our community such an issue? Well, there's lots of factors there, and we'll talk a little bit more about socioeconomics. We'll talk about psychosocial issues, and I'll break those down and talk about what does psychosocial mean, what do the social determinants of health is a term that you'll hear sometimes, and what that really means to us as a people. But the sad truth is, regardless of the reason, we do not do as well as other ethnic groups when it comes to our health. Some of that is genetic. It is, and we'll talk about that later, about where our ancestors came from, things that we have inherited, but we also inherit behaviors, and those are things that we can make a difference and change. So the challenges we have also do come from the fact that we are African Americans. We do have a higher incidence of hypertension. That's what HTN stands for. So if you think of all black men, you take 100 of them, about 40 of them will have high blood pressure. If you take 100 African American women, 45 of them will have high blood pressure. So why is hypertension such an issue in our community? Some of those things, again, are genetic. Our kidneys, the kidneys are actually what control your blood pressure. It's not your heart. Your heart follows the directions that your kidneys give them, so does your brain. When it comes to hypertension, it is your kidneys. So how much soda pop we drink, how much salt we put on our greens, how much ham and fried foods we tend to like, all of those things will affect our kidneys adversely and tell the kidney to retain water, and that the more fluid we have that we retain, that's not the same as drinking water, and I'll talk more about that as well, but the more water we retain, the higher the pressure on the blood vessel. And it is that blood vessel that when it ruptures, if that happens in your brain, that's a stroke. If it happens in your heart, that's a heart attack. If that happens in your abdomen, that's an aneurysm. And often those are fatal because you don't get a lot of warning. They call hypertension the silent killer for a reason. A lot of times your first symptom is your first heart attack or your first stroke. So obviously we want to intervene before then. infant mortality is defined as the first year of life for a child. So as soon as that child is born until they reach a year of age or 12 months of age, anything that happens to that child, especially if they pass away, that adds to our infant mortality rate. You've heard probably on the news that Cincinnati has a real issue when it comes to a high infant mortality rate. And that's actually stunning, considering how many resources we have as a, the third largest city in the state of Ohio. Why is our infant mortality rate so high? So we had to look at that. Is it the rate at which that expectant mother gets to her obstetrician? We ideally would love to see that child, that mom, get prenatal care in the first trimester. That's the first 3 months of pregnancy. When they get that early intervention, that early care, that drives the numbers down. But some of the other things that affect it is the scheduling or the frequency of those deliveries. When a mom gets pregnant again within 1 year of her delivery, that second pregnancy has a 30% higher rate of loss than if she had waited a full year after her last delivery to get pregnant again. So it is the frequency, and if you talk to any of your ancestors or, excuse me, you'll hear stories, at least I know in my family, where, great-grandma had baby number 1, and 2 or 3 months later, no period, here comes baby number 2. And they did that back then because they needed help on the farm or whatever their occupation was. So the more children they had, the more help they had. But you also hear, oh yeah, she lost 3. Or yeah, there were originally 15 of us, but we lost 4. So, and that's why. It is because the mom's body needs a chance to recover and regenerate those nutrients. Because as lovely as our children are, they're born and we love them instantly, but until they're born, while they're inside mom, they technically are a parasite. That baby takes everything it needs first, and mom gets whatever's left. So that's why nutrition during pregnancy is such a big deal. Incidence of diabetes, again, if you think about 100 people, 12 of them, if they're African American, 12 of them will have diabetes out of 100. But if you take a European population or the white population, it's only 9. So what's the difference between race and ethnicity? Have you ever filled out a form, and when you get to the race question, they only give you 2 choices, Hispanic or non-Hispanic. And you say, well, wait a minute. Okay, I'm not Hispanic, but I know my people came from Egypt, or I know my people came from Europe. So those are different ethnic groups. Why don't I get to pick? Well, talk to the General Accounting Office about that. That is actually a federal requirement. There are lots and lots of races. To simplify things, they chose Hispanic versus non-Hispanic. Because at the time, these regulations, that thing called the Federal Register, where the rules from the government kind of come out, and there's thousands of them, they decided to, since at that time, a lot of our immigrants were of Hispanic descent, they wanted to keep track of that. So that's why you only get to choose Hispanic or non-Hispanic. It is not an acknowledgement. It is not a discounting of the other races. It was purely for that reason. Ethnicity is part of what we take pride in as African Americans. It is the fact that it is our culture. It is the kind of foods that we like to eat, how we like to prepare them. All of those things have to do with our culture and therefore our ethnicity. As time goes on, lots of us, what I know of my family history is I have some American Indian in me, as well as I have some European blood, as well as African American. So almost all of us are a mixture of multiple races. The value in knowing what your ethnic background is because different ethnicities have different risks for disease. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So here's that social determinants of health. So if let's say there's a set of identical triplets, they are absolutely identical in every way. Let's say that they're all girls, absolutely identical, and you split them up. You take one daughter and you put them with Bill and Melinda Gates. So they grow up with everything they could possibly need, literally the silver spoon in their mouth. Then you take another child and take the opposite spectrum. Give that child to a woman who doesn't have a home, who's homeless, and they're just barely getting by. Give that child to her. Then take that third child and put them in a boarding school where all of their essentials are met, but there's not a lot of family interaction. So now you've got these three identical triplets, and they grow up, and when they get to be, let's say, 25, and we bring them all back together and we look at their, how they have grown up. The one that was homeless didn't get her immunizations, didn't get very poor nutrition, so she's probably going to be below her ideal body weight. She may have gotten school here, gotten school there, so her job options are very, very limited. Really very, very minimal stimulation. Societal, let's take the child that was put in the boarding school. Smart, got all the grades, nutritionally she's fine, but has trouble with relationships. So when it's time to date, she's kind of skittish about that, would prefer to be by herself, doesn't have a group of friends. Anybody here got a group of girlfriends that you can talk to, that you can go on a trip with and you can just share anything with them? Well, let's say that middle triplet, she can't do that. Hasn't ever had that. She had her basics, but doesn't have those relationships. Then let's take the child that Bill and Melinda Gates raised. She's got everything. She's got the nice clothes. She's got the shoes. She knows which of the 4 forks that are on the table she should use for a salad, and she just knows all of these things. She's got a group of friends that think she's the best thing since sliced bread, and she's had the best of medical care as she goes along. Of those three children, obviously the child with the Melinda Gates and Bill Gates raised, she thinks that she's hit bomb. She's got everything going on, but her risk for diabetes is going to be exactly the same as those other 3 children, as the other 2 children, but her diabetes may not show up until she's 60 because she's had the right food, she's exercising, going to the gym, might even have her own personal trainer. That child that was in boarding school will probably get her diabetes at about, let's say, 40, 45, largely because she's eating meals by herself, so she's fixing more food than because she doesn't have other people that are going to be sharing that meal with her. The child that grew up homeless probably gets diabetes at about 25, 30, because she's eating whatever she can get her hands on. There's not a lot of choice in what she can eat, but they all develop diabetes. And the only issue is when, because the genetics you can't change, but our environment plays a role in disease. So that's the take-home point. So talking about diabetes, anybody recognize those pictures there? I'm from the South, so I didn't know there was a way to eat chicken other than fried until I was probably 16 or 17 before I knew that there was another way to eat chicken. Well, I take that back. We did have barbecue chicken a lot, but to bake it without a lot of seasoning, I had no idea that you could do that to a chicken, or that you should do that to a chicken. Macaroni and cheese, when I wouldn't eat anything else, I'd eat macaroni and cheese. Our greens, we love to put some pork in there, gives them a little better flavor, those kinds of things. Well, the sad thing about that is that pork that we put in there is full of sodium. So, have you ever eaten a bag of potato chips? So, what do after you finish the bag? You want something to drink, right? Because it's salty. So you drink that water, and next thing you know, gee whiz, my rings are kind of tight. I think I'm going to slip my shoes off because they're getting kind of tight. Sodium loves water. Salt loves water. There's lots of different kinds of salt. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. Diabetes is the #1 cause of blindness in the United States. And we already know that our people are at higher risk of developing diabetes. So what is diabetes? And I'm going to keep it really simple so that I don't step on the next speaker's toes. But diabetes is an inability for your body to properly use sugar. So when you go to get that piece of pie, what happens? You eat the piece of pie, and your body says, okay, there's my energy. Because back in the day, our basic human reflex is, when I get weak and tired, my body wants fuel. So we were built to eat to provide energy. Not, oh man, that looks good. I know I just ate, but I'm going to have another piece of that. We tend to eat because it's there, or it's time to eat. But our bodies are actually made really to take in energy. And that's what your body does with that piece of pie. So it takes that piece of pie and it starts breaking down the individual chemical components in that piece of pie. And when it gets to the sugar, it's got a couple of choices. It can either use it for energy, which means it's like putting gas in your car so that your car will run, or it will store it. So if your body doesn't need it right then, let's say it's bedtime, you just got a taste for something, you're going to have that piece of pie, but it's bedtime. So your body's not going to use it, it's going to store it for later. Well, you go to sleep, you sleep for 8 hours, it's storing it, right? You get up the next morning, you say, okay, it's time to go to work. You grab your coffee and your muffin or whatever, you head out the door. Well, you get to work, you find the closest parking spot, you park, you go in, and you sit down at your desk until lunchtime. Then you get up, and you go eat again. So that piece of pie never got used, it got stored. So when we continue that process, that's how we gain weight. But the diabetic, the body doesn't understand very well when to make insulin and when to store it. Diabetics there's a couple things that go along with diabetes. Not enough insulin. Insulin is the enzyme that breaks up the glucose. So when you're doing dishes after you fry your chicken, and you put those greasy dishes in the dishwater, what do? You put some Dawn in there. And the Dawn does what? It breaks up the grease. So that's what insulin does for sugar. And insulin tells that sugar, hey, go to those muscles that are going to help us walk. Go to the brain, because I've got a presentation I got to put together. Or I've got this pile of charts that I need to process. So send it to the brain. Insulin is the bridge that takes sugar out of the blood and puts it where it needs to go so it can be used. Whether that's a muscle or a brain. And remember, your heart is a muscle. And their fuel, again, is that glucose. When you don't have enough insulin, that sugar will either be stored, it goes to the liver to be stored, or it just sits in the blood. Why is that a problem? So if you just took a pack of sugar and you sit it on your arm, you're only going to let it stay there for about 10, maybe 15 seconds before you want to scratch. The reason you want to scratch is because it itches. The acid that's in that sugar will start to irritate your skin, and you're going to wipe that off. Well, imagine that on the inside of your arteries, because that's what high blood sugar is. Too much sugar in the arteries, it irritates the inside of the artery. If that artery is in the eyes, that's where the retinopathy comes from. That's why blindness ensues. That blood vessel literally dies, so there's no blood flow to the retina. If that happens in the fingertips or in the toes, and remember that the smaller the blood vessel, the more suspect it will be when the sugar is high. And I'll show you a picture of that as well. But it's kind of like dropping a marble down your pipes. If you drop that marble down your kitchen sink, that marble is going to roll until it gets to a pipe that's smaller than it is. When it gets to that narrow spot, what's it going to do? It's going to block it, and then you've got to call the plumber because no more water can get past it. Same thing happens in your arteries. When that sugar irritates that artery, it goes from being nice and wide open like that to pretty narrow like that. And then the smallest little bit of either cholesterol or clot goes down that artery. It blocks the artery. If that happens in your brain, again, that's a stroke. If it happens in your heart, that's a heart attack. If that happens in your legs, in a toe or in a foot, that leads to an amputation. Yes, sir.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if we do intake sugar, should we, did I hear you say if we exercise a little bit afterward, that helps break down?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You got it. You got it.
So I can eat more. No.
That's
Long
So, with that said, how much and how long would one need to exercise if I have a piece of cake?
Sure. So your next speaker is going to talk about food labels. Start looking at the labels of the food that you're purchasing, and look at the sugar content. So, for example, the average chocolate chip cookie, let's say a Chips Ahoy cookie, is about 150 calories. Wow. One cookie.
Okay.
Yeah. It takes a half of an hour.
Chips Ahoy?
Absolutely. So it takes about a half an hour of moderate walking to burn 150 calories. So that's another way to think about how your body metabolizes sugar. So it really is the balance between what you take in and how you're going to burn it. So give that some thought. And I'll tell you one thing I do at my house. I don't have a large family, but when, Thanksgiving, when we have our, Resurrection Day, when we have our big meals, and everybody, all the men want to go to the TV to watch whatever the game is, and the women all go to the kitchen, chat, and the children go out to the yard. I turn the TV off. I send the men out to watch the children, and the women, we either walk around the house or just go outside where the sun is. We do something. Sometimes I have to send the guys out to empty the trash. Anything to keep them moving so that they don't just eat and go sit down. That's also the issue about that bedtime snack. You might want to rethink that just a little bit. We will tell diabetics to have a bedtime snack, but what we're talking about is not a Snickers bar. What we're talking about is a fruit cup with either cottage cheese or those packs of crackers. You can get 6 in a pack. That with some water. We're talking about 200 calories or something like that for a diabetic before they go to bed. Because again, their body does not make insulin the way it should, and it tends to keep that sugar in the bloodstream where it's going to do damage and not metabolize it so that it goes out through the urine. How can we prevent diabetes? So, again, going back to the story about the triplets, When it is genetic, it's particularly type 2 diabetes. Two types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetics are almost always children. We find this disease from age 3 months to as old as 15 or 16. Those children with type 1 diabetes do not make insulin. They do not. There's an abnormality in their pancreas that prevents their ability to make insulin. So the only treatment for them is to give them insulin. They take insulin shots. Some of those children, we are learning how to do pancreas transplants. The pancreas is the organ in the body. It sits right underneath the stomach, and it's supposed to make insulin. We're learning how to do transplants of the pancreas. It's not quite ready for prime time. It's very uncommon, but it is something we're learning how to do. Type 2 diabetes means that the body is able to make some insulin, but as we get older, it's like a car. If you drive it at 100 miles an hour every time you get in it, it's only going to last so long before it fails. But if you drive it at, drive the speed limit, 40, 45, 55, it lasts a lot longer before you have to replace it. Type 2 diabetes is kind of the same way. The pancreas has a very defined lifespan, unfortunately, because of the inherited deficiency of the beta cells in the pancreas. And I won't get any more specific about that, except that the pancreas over time is less and less able to make insulin when it should. So an example of what your pancreas does. So have you ever been just driving down the street, you're not even thinking about food, and then you pass a bakery, or you pass somebody in the neighborhood who's barbecuing. Next thing you know, your stomach is growling. And you're like, well, what's up? I didn't realize I was hungry, but boy, that smells good. And then you want some. The reason your stomach is growling is because your brain, you have an olfactory nerve that sits right in your brain between your eyes, below your pituitary, and it says, that smells like food. Let me prepare for that meal. Because your brain doesn't know that you're driving by. It thinks the plate is in front of you. So it is preparing your body to digest that meal that it thinks is in front of you. It doesn't know that you were just driving by. So it starts to create and secrete insulin along with some other enzymes and proteins that your stomach is going to need to break down that meal. The next thing you know, you're hungry. Now, what you're hopefully going to do is, instead of making a U-turn and going back to the neighbor's house or to the barbecue place, is you'll drink a glass of water, which will satisfy those enzymes. Okay, there's something going in there, but you're not eating something that you're going to have to burn those calories off later. So, we can't change genetics. What can we change? We can change our diet. Carbohydrates are turned into sugar by the body. So carbohydrates are certainly, they're the cookies, the pies, the candies, the cakes, but it's also the bread, including cornbread, the bread that we put on our sandwiches. It is the rice, it's the potatoes, including the potato chips, the sweet potatoes, the pastas. Those are all carbohydrates. As soon as you eat them, the stomach enzymes start to break that up. They turn it into sugar. You will hear the athletes talk about carb loading before an event. That's exactly what they're doing. They're shoving all of those carbs, that bread, that rice, so that their body can use it for that game that they're about to play. Increase your fiber. This one is easier than you think. So fiber is a bran muffin or a wheat muffin instead of that blueberry muffin. It is the wheat pasta, the wheat spaghetti instead of the white. It's the brown rice instead of the white rice. The more polished that rice is, the higher the carbohydrate count. Exercise. This is not the evil thing that we tend to think it is. Exercise can be as simple as, instead of taking that closest parking spot to the front door, It could be as easy as parking at the end of that aisle, next to a light post so that you got security issues. But that extra 100 yards is more calories that you're burning. Another trick that I used to tell my patients is when you go to the mall or if you're going to Target or Walmart, take a walk all the way around the store before you stop to buy the first item. Just to get in, and first of all, you kind of scope out some of the sales, but that's some extra exercise. Exercise does not mean 2 hours at the gym every day. It does not mean that. I need 30 minutes a day, 4 to 5 times a week. And if it's something you enjoy, all the better. If there's and I love the Y for lots of reasons. They have lots of group activities. It might be a volleyball league. Even bowling counts for exercise. They have spinning classes. That's the stationary bike. All of that counts. All of that counts. 30 minutes a day. Now, hypertension. So this is my salt slide. So we've got the salt that everybody thinks about and knows about. And just as an FYI, sea salt, what was the other one? Crystal calcium or something. It's all salt. Light salt, it's all sodium. Your body treats it the same way. Yes, ma'am.
What about kosher salt? Is that all the same?
Yes, ma'am. It's all salt. It's just a nice name. Sometimes they make it different colors. It's still salt. Your body treats it the same way. Yes, ma'am. Then we've got the green salt. That's our pickles and our olives. There's the pink salt, the ham, the sausage, pepperoni, all the processed meats. They're all cured in sodium. And of course, our French fries, our hamburgers and hot dogs are all full of sodium. So yes, sir.
I'm sorry, so the green salt
Yes, sir.
is only after it's cured and pickled that is bad, like a cucumber is good?
A plain cucumber is wonderful. It is what we do to it afterwards.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The sweet and sour ones is still a lot of salt in there. Sorry. And in full disclosure, again, I grew up in the South. So my grandmother used to can those bread butter pickles. Oh, I could eat a jar by myself. But, I still got the swollen hands. And the other challenge we have as African Americans is metabolize sodium. We have folks that we work with who, let's say it's the Christmas party and you've got the big spread. And, some of our folks of European descent, they can eat the potato chips, they can eat the cute little, the little meatballs, they can eat all that stuff, and it not bother them. We just walk by the table, and we can